I walked into the mall smiling, excited to see my daughter at work. I had on my old Sunday dress, the one with the faded flowers, and my favorite sandals. But the moment Tiara saw me, her smile dropped. She burst out laughing, loud enough for shoppers to turn. "Oh my God, Mom, you look like a walking thrift store." Her manager joined in, sneering. "We don't take donations here." My heart twisted, but I said nothing. I just looked at them both and whispered, "That's fine. I won't be staying long." Subscribe for more stories that hit deep. People always say motherhood is a beautiful journey, but they forget to mention that sometimes it's a lonely one too. I raised Tiara all by myself after her father died. He passed when she was just 4, and I'll never forget the way she clung to me at the funeral, not fully understanding what was happening. From that day, it was just me and her against the world. Back then, I ran a small but thriving textile business from our compound. I designed traditional clothes for weddings, birthdays, naming ceremonies. My hands were always busy, sewing, sketching, measuring. But no matter how tired I was, I always made time for Tiara. I even used leftover fabrics to make matching outfits for us. She'd twirl in front of the mirror, grinning. "We're the prettiest, Mama," she'd say. Everything I did for her. When private school fees came knocking, I sold my jewelry. When the landlord raised rent, I worked double. I didn't care about fashion trends or fancy clothes. I wore the same outfits year after year, patching where needed. Every cent went into her books, her uniforms, her future. And for a while, it seemed worth it. She was a bright student, polite, kind, or so I thought. But when she turned 16, something in her started to shift. She began coming home with her blouse tied up to show her belly and spoke with an accent I didn't recognize. Her words got shorter, sharper. "Ma, can't you wear something better?" she'd mutter when I came to school events. Or, "Ugh, don't hug me in public, people are watching." It stung, but I told myself it was just teenage pride, a phase. I prayed over her pillow every night. By the time she entered college, she'd stopped inviting me to her school functions entirely. When I visited her hostel with home-cooked food, she barely let me in. "My roommates are here," she'd whisper, looking over her shoulder like I was a ghost. Still, I smiled and handed her the jollof rice. I told myself she was just busy. Then one day, I overheard her on the phone. She was outside her hostel, laughing loudly. "No, my mom doesn't own a business. She's just a housemate or something. I barely grew up with her. I raised myself." I didn't confront her. I walked home that night with my heart aching like it was being wrung out by God himself. But I didn't cry. I told myself again it was just a phase. Things only grew colder from there. She started working part-time at the new fashion mall downtown. I was happy. Thought maybe she was following in my footsteps. But every time I asked about her job, she brushed me off. "You wouldn't get it," she'd say. "It's high-end fashion, not wrapper and head tie stuff." Then one Sunday, I gathered courage and decided to surprise her at work. I dressed neatly in my favorite Ankara dress, the one I wore to church weddings. My sandals were a little worn but clean. I even tied my jeel just right. I was proud of how I looked, even if it wasn't trendy. I walked into that shiny mall, clutching my handbag, smiling. My heart was pounding with excitement. I pictured Tiara's face lighting up when she saw me. But that's not what happened. She looked at me like I was a stray dog, like I was nothing. She laughed, loud, harsh, cruel. And her manager laughed too. Strangers stared. It wasn't just embarrassment I felt. It was betrayal. After everything I gave up, the years of carrying her on my back while sewing through the night, all she saw was a woman in old clothes. She didn't see me, she didn't see Mama. And in that moment, something inside me began to shift. Something slow. Something deep. I didn't say much. Just 3 words. "That's fine. I won't be staying long." She thought I meant I was leaving the store. But I meant something entirely different. After that day at the mall, I didn't sleep. Not because of the laughter or the insults, though those hurt more than I can explain. What kept me awake was the silence that followed. The the quiet truth that I had raised a daughter who saw my love as shame and my sacrifice as failure. I sat by my window, looking out at the empty street, thinking back on how we got here. Tiara wasn't always like this, but somewhere between school and ambition, she learned to trade kindness for pride. And I let it happen, thinking love alone was enough. She'd always been drawn to shiny things. As a child, she'd collect bottle caps and pretend they were diamonds. In secondary school, she'd beg for new clothes when her classmates had better ones. I tried to explain that our worth wasn't in what we wore, but in how we treated people. She'd nod, but her eyes would always drift to what others had. I should have seen the signs. But love makes you blind sometimes. By the time she started working at the mall, she had completely reinvented herself. She told her friends she came from humble beginnings, but never mentioned my name. She lied about her background, told them I was a distant relative. She wore wigs that cost more than a month's groceries and heels so high I worried she'd fall. I heard through a neighbor that she started posting online, pictures in front of luxury bags, captioned with quotes she never lived. Her manager, Victor, encouraged it. I'd met him once, briefly. Tall, smooth talker. Smelled like expensive cologne and empty promises. The kind of man who knows how to make girls feel important until he doesn't. Tiara said he was mentoring her. I could see right through him, but she wouldn't listen. One afternoon, while sweeping the veranda, I found an old envelope tucked inside a sewing book. It had been years since I'd opened that drawer. The envelope had my name written in delicate cursive, and inside was something I hadn't seen in a long, long time. Business papers, from when I ran Grace Textiles. There it was. My name beside a percentage, 45%. Ownership. I blinked, stunned. My memory rushed back. Years ago, when the stress of running everything alone became too much, I had taken an offer from an old apprentice of mine, Yemi. He had done well for himself thanks to the skills he learned under me. When he offered to buy part of my company, I agreed, on one condition. I would retain quiet shares, and one day, I'd return if I wanted to. At the time, I needed the money for Tiara's college acceptance fee. That was the last I heard of it. Until now. I felt something rise in my chest. Not anger, not pride, but a quiet knowing that I was not helpless, that my story wasn't over. I decided to visit an old friend, Mr. Daniels, a calm man who used to handle the legal parts of my business. We hadn't spoken in years, but when I arrived at his office, he recognized me instantly. "Grace?" he said, standing up in surprise. "You look just the same." I laughed. "Worse shoes. Same spirit." I showed him the papers. He read through them carefully, then looked up with wide eyes. "Do you know what this means?" I shook my head. He leaned forward. "Your old company, the one Yemi turned into a brand? It merged with a luxury chain 2 years ago. And that luxury chain owns the mall where your daughter works." I froze. He smiled. "Grace, you're still a shareholder. And with this amount, you hold controlling power. You can walk into that building tomorrow and take over the store if you wanted to." My hands trembled. I wasn't interested in revenge. That's not who I was. But something in me whispered that maybe it was time to remind the world, and my daughter, who I truly was. Not a beggar, not an embarrassment. I was Mama Grace, the woman who built something from nothing, and I was ready to return. The next morning, I dressed just like before. No makeup, no fancy clothes, just my worn sandals, my faded Ankara skirt, and the same soft blouse with a loose button at the collar. I tied my jewel carefully, the way my mother taught me. I looked in the mirror and smiled, not because I looked rich, but because I looked like me. This time, I didn't go alone. Mr. Daniels met me outside the mall, dressed in a dark suit, holding a leather folder. He didn't say much, just nodded and followed behind as I walked through the sliding doors. Everything looked the same. The polished floors, the smell of overpriced perfume, the two bright lights trying to make people feel important. But this time, I didn't feel small. The store was busier than usual, full of customers browsing purses that cost more than a teacher's salary. I spotted Tiara at the counter, laughing with Victor as they smiled at a woman paying for a handbag. They didn't see me right away. So I stood still and watched my daughter work. Her nails were long and painted gold, and her hair was styled like the actresses she used to admire on TV. She looked confident, proud, and far from the little girl who used to twirl around in my old wrappers pretending to be a queen. But then her eyes landed on me, and her face dropped, just for a second. Then came the smirk. "Oh," she said loudly, nudging Victor. "Look who's back. Still haven't learned to dress before coming to civilization?" Some customers chuckled. Victor grinned. "You again? Didn't you get enough embarrassment last time, madam?" I didn't flinch. I just nodded politely. "Good morning?" Victor waved a hand dismissively. "Sorry, Ma. We don't allow beggars in the store. Company policy." The disrespect hit harder than a slap, but I just smiled gently and turned to Mr. Daniels. "Are we ready?" He nodded, then stepped forward, opening his folder. His voice was calm but loud enough to command attention. "My name is Mr. Daniels, representing Grace Holdings. As of today, ownership documents have been transferred to reflect that Madam Grace here," he gestured toward me, "is the majority shareholder of this store and its parent company." The entire room went quiet. Tiara blinked. "What?" Victor laughed nervously. "You're joking, right? What kind of prank is this?" Mr. Daniels ignored them. "All staff will report directly to her from this moment forward, and any disrespect toward her is grounds for immediate termination." Victor's mouth opened, then shut, then opened again. Wait, this can't be legal. She's just some old woman in rags." Daniels raised an eyebrow. "Old women in rags don't usually own 51% of your salary, Mr. Victor." I took a step forward. My voice didn't shake. "Victor, you're fired. Kindly leave the store." His eyes bulged. "What? You can't—" "I just did." He looked around. Customers were watching. Staff stood frozen. Even Tiara didn't say a word. "I'll call corporate," he muttered, storming past me. "You'll hear from my lawyer." Mr. Daniels cleared his throat. "Please do. The number hasn't changed." And just like that, he was gone. I turned to Tiara. She was staring at me, mouth slightly open, confused, hurt, furious. "Mom," she whispered, "is this some kind of lesson? A trick?" "No," I said softly. "It's truth. A truth you forgot a long time ago." I didn't know." "I know," I said. "That's the problem." I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I just turned, walked to the center of the store, and stood beneath the chandelier. "Everyone, please," Daniel said to the staff. "Meet your new boss, Mama Grace." No applause, just silence. Respectful, uncomfortable silence. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. Tiara just stood there, frozen behind the counter, unable to move. I didn't fire her. Not yet. There were still some things money couldn't teach, but in that moment she finally understood something. The woman she mocked for being poor was the same woman who now owned the very place where she earned her pride. And I wasn't done yet. After the storm of silence settled, I took a slow walk around the store. Not as a shopper, not as a mother desperate for her child's approval, but as the owner. The same assistants who once ignored me now stepped aside respectfully, heads slightly bowed, hands folded in front of them. The air was thick with tension and curiosity. Some whispered to each other, stealing glances. I didn't mind. Let them talk. Let them see. Tiara stood behind the counter, frozen, clutching the edge of the glass like it might save her from sinking. I could feel her eyes following my every step. I didn't look back. I walked slowly, observing everything. Shelves of handbags, tables of sunglasses, mannequins dressed in overpriced dresses stitched poorly by machines in faraway countries. Fashion, yes, but no soul, no story. Then I saw it. The handbag. It sat on a glass pedestal in the center display. The most expensive item in the store. Cream leather, gold accents, and a small diamond-shaped logo that had girls like Tiara drooling on their phones. I remembered the name. She used to talk about it all the time. "That bag is worth more than your whole wardrobe, Mom," she once said, laughing. I stepped toward it and gently lifted it from the stand. The assistant watching gasped slightly. "That one is—" "It's not for handling without gloves, Ma," she whispered. I turned to her, smiling. "It's all right, dear, I'll be taking it with me." She blinked. Oh, yes, of course, Ma. Let me ring it up." "No need," said Mr. Daniels, stepping beside me. "Add it to the personal account. Receipt to my office." "Yes, sir." I held the bag in my hands, feeling the weight, not just of the leather or metal, but of everything it symbolized. Shame, rejection, image, and now? Power. I turned and walked slowly toward the front of the store. I didn't rush. I didn't need to. I felt every step. As I passed the counter, I paused. Tiara stood stiff, eyes glistening, lips pressed tight. "Mama," she started, voice barely above a whisper. I looked at her. She looked like a stranger. No longer the laughing girl in mismatched socks dancing around our room. No longer the daughter who used to help me cut patterns on the floor. Now she looked small, not because of her clothes or posture, but because she finally realized what pride had cost her. She tried to speak again. "I didn't know, I raised my hand gently." She stopped. "I didn't come here to embarrass you," I said softly. "You've done that enough for both of us." She flinched. "I came to remember who I was, before I made myself small. For you." Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't wait for them to fall. I adjusted the strap of the bag on my shoulder and gave her one last look. "I used to clothe you with my pain," I said. "Now I'll wear my pride." And I walked out. The automatic doors slid open, and the sunlight met my skin like a long-lost friend. For the first time in many years, I stood tall. Not because I had money, not because I owned a building, but because I had finally stopped begging for love that should have been mine freely. I heard the whispers behind me as I walked through the mall. "Isn't that her mother? She bought the store? Did you see what she just did?" Let them talk. Let them all talk. I didn't need their approval. I had found something better. Myself. I reached the parking lot and slid into the back of Mr. Daniels' car. He smiled at me through the rearview mirror. "You handled that with grace," he said. I chuckled. "I suppose that's still my name?" He laughed gently, then drove off. As the mall disappeared behind us, I rested the bag on my lap, not because I wanted to show it off, but because it reminded me of how far I'd come. From patched-up dresses and sacrifices no one remembered, to this moment. A quiet victory, a loud lesson, and something my daughter would never forget. Weeks passed. The story of what happened at the mall spread like wildfire, not just in our neighborhood but across town. Some people praised me, others were stunned, but most just stayed silent. They looked at me differently now. The woman they once pitied now walked with her head high. Not because I had money, but because I had taken back my dignity. Victor never showed his face again. Word had it that he tried to apply at other stores, but the video of his arrogance that day had gone around. Nobody wanted him. His charm wasn't enough to cover what people now knew about him. As for Tiara, she didn't return to work either. I didn't fire her. I didn't have to. She quit on her own. Or maybe she just couldn't face the shame of having her mother for a boss. Either way, I didn't hear from her. Until one rainy afternoon. I was at the store, now renamed Grace Threads. We'd redesigned it completely. The glassy cold feel had been replaced with warm African colors, soft music, and hand-woven fabrics. I hired older women, tailors from my past, and trained new girls who wanted more than just selfies and expensive shoes. The store was filled with stories again, not just sales. We didn't sell shame here, we sold pride. That afternoon, as the clouds poured softly over the rooftop, I stood at the counter going through receipts when I heard the door open. I looked up and saw her. Tiara. She was soaked. Her makeup had smudged. No wig, just her natural hair, pulled into a small bun. She wore a simple shirt and jeans. No heels. No designer logos. Just my daughter. She held a small nylon bag, groceries maybe, and stood at the entrance, uncertain. Not the confident young woman from before. Not the sarcastic girl from the mall. This was the little girl who used to run into my arms after school smelling of chalk and biscuits. I said nothing. She stepped inside slowly, head down. "Mama," she whispered. I didn't move. "I've been trying to find the words," she said, her voice shaky. "But there aren't any that feel right. I was horrible to you, and I can't take it back. I was ashamed of what you wore, when I should have been proud of who you were." The store was quiet, only the soft rain outside and the slow ticking of the wall clock. "I thought being rich meant having expensive things," she continued, eyes glassy. "But now I see. It means having someone who never gave up on you, even when you didn't deserve it." She stepped closer. "I lost everything. The job, my friends. The lies caught up with me. Nobody wants to work with someone who disrespected their own mother in public. I ruined my name." She reached into the nylon bag and pulled out a small envelope. "I got a job, it's nothing fancy, but I've started saving. I want to pay you back little by little. For school, for the pain, for the things I said. Please, just let me try." She placed the envelope on the counter. Still, I said nothing. Because sometimes silence is the loudest form of mercy. She bowed her head. "Even if you never forgive me, I just needed to say it." Then she turned to leave. But just before she reached the door, I spoke. "Tiara." She froze. "Do you remember the bag you always wanted?" I asked softly. She nodded without turning around. "I carried it once, just to remind myself I could." She turned slightly, her eyes red. "But the truth is," I smiled, "it never fit me. So I gave it away." She blinked. "You did?" I nodded. "To a young girl from our village who dreams of owning a fashion line one day? She has no mother. But now she has hope." Tiara's lips trembled. "I kept something better for you," I added. She stepped back inside, her voice shaking. "What?" I walked over, took her hand, and placed in it an old worn fabric, the same one I used to make her matching dresses when she was 5. "This," I whispered. "This is who we are." She clutched it to her chest, and finally broke down. We stood there, mother and daughter, not in a store, not as boss and former employee, but as what we were always meant to be. Family. Love doesn't come in price tags, respect doesn't come in handbags, and the deepest riches come when we finally see the value in what we almost threw away.